As a matter of fact, when I was in schools, not that many years ago, but some years ago in Los Angeles, we used to go down to either NBC or CBS to the studios at midnight because there was a character who did a radio show there with a live audience, something that had never done before or since, and was never done well except that once. And I think that was really almost the beginning of things for you, wasn't it?
It was early in the game, Jack. For 2 years before that, I had done a coast-to-coast comedy show on the Mutual Network called It's Smile Time. And that went off, and to make ends meet, I took a job on the late-night shift there at KNX, and as soon as I felt pretty certain that the people around the station were in bed, I just stopped playing records and turned it into another comedy show.
It must have been fun, though. It always looked like you were enjoying it.
Oh, it really was. In fact, that was the creative point of origin of what eventually on television became The Tonight Show.
Mm-hmm.
CBS brought me east to do the same show on television, and I did it at various times of the evening, in the afternoon, and the morning. And then after about 2 years of that, NBC hired me, and we put it on late at night, and the same thing I had done in the old days in Hollywood, and just called it The Tonight Show.
Of all the television now that you've done, because you did that the show with Louis Nye and the Once a Week show, is it easier as to work in television? Is it easier to create? Is it easier for the performer to do a once a week show rather than trying to sustain something every night?
It's actually easier as far as the strain on the creative faculties is concerned to do an every night show. Those shows require, if the producers of them will forgive me, very little production and planning. The way we used to do them in the old days, they required a lot more, but the way they're done now, they don't require any, although they're still entirely enjoyable. The only thing you have to do now is book about 4 guests, and you sit around and talk for 90 minutes.
Were you live then?
Oh, yes, we did the show live. The way we used to do it, we did a lot more music in the old days. We had, as you know, Steve Lawrence, Nita Gourmet, and Andy Williams, and a lot of other wonderful young singers. And we used to do a great many comedy sketches of the kind you ordinarily would see on an early evening show. But over the years, the format has become simpler and more relaxed. And but even when I did it, we were not under pressure because we had 90 minutes a night to have at the people, and if something didn't work, they'd forget it 20 minutes later.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're on once a week, you have to be sensational every 4 seconds or you're out of the business.
Really more is expected of you if you're on once a week.
Yes, apparently.
Well, I don't know if you started in Phoenix, Arizona, but I remember years ago when I worked in Phoenix, I used to go to KOY every once in a while there, and they used to say Steve Allen used to sit there, and Steve Allen used to work here, and Steve Allen used to drink out of that cup. You were revered.
I did a lot of drinking out of cups in those days. No, actually, thank you, Jack, for that complimentary thought there. But I did start in radio at KOY in Phoenix. I had done a little amateur work in Chicago before that, but KOY was my first real paycheck. I worked there for, 2 or 3 years, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've really run the gamut, haven't you? There isn't much you haven't done, with the exception maybe of motion pictures, and maybe I'm not aware of it. Maybe you've done that too.
Yes, I've done a few pictures. The only one I think that was worth talking about was the Benny Goodman story.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the
Oh,
others,
sure. How could I have forgotten that?
Some of the others are probably better forgotten. But as a matter of fact, as soon as I finish up here at Lake Tahoe, Jane and I are hurrying right back to town. We're doing a vignette scene in a picture at Universal with Jonathan Winters.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like another busy season for us.
Well, now, you did a late-night television show not too long ago for the Westinghouse people.
Yes.
It was carried here. It was a delightful show. I remember in particular the nights you were trying to pick up a bicycle with a steam shovel, among other things. Why did you give that up, if I may ask?
Well, I had a 2.5-year contract on that, and we ran for the 2.5 years, and at the end of it, I was doing 2 shows. I was doing that show plus I've Got a Secret. And it was a little bit like a repetition of the experience where I quit the old Tonight Show to begin with. For a while in the old days, NBC had me doing the Tonight Show late at night, and then my once-a-week comedy show, which was then opposite Ed Sullivan's program. And I just decided that carrying 2 shows was too heavy a load.
Mm-hmm.
So in this instance, you can get more money, to be very crass about it, by doing I've Got a Secret for half an hour once a week than you can by doing a late-night show, 90 minutes times 5.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
The late-night shows are a wonderful way to have fun, but nobody, frankly, makes very much money off them. And even the guests, the biggest stars in the business, all appear on those shows for, I think, $271, which is scale.
Uh-huh.
The MC makes somewhat more than scale, but surprisingly not as much more as people might think.
Well, I understood that Carson made a great deal of money.
He does make a great deal of money in total wages, but he doesn't make a great deal of it from The Tonight Show. Of course, the phrase a great deal is entirely relative. I suppose the average person would consider it a phenomenal salary, if you work in a meat market.
Mm-hmm.
But,
or a radio station.
But compared with what, in other words, if Johnny Carson, let's say, were to do a once-a-week variety show, he would possibly make, maybe $15,000 for one night's work. And I don't want to discuss Johnny's salary in public, but he doesn't make anywhere near that, nor does anyone else, nor did I when I emceed The Tonight Show. That's my point.
For heaven's sakes. At the time you were on opposite Ed Sullivan, I know it made good press and got a lot of print, but there was talk of a bitter rivalry. Was that all publicity, or was it really true?
It was a little bit of both. There was never any really bitter rivalry, at least not in my mind. There was simply an old-fashioned argument about a couple of specifics, and I remember how flabbergasted I was. I knew his show was popular, and I knew my show was popular, but I was utterly astounded when this, as I say, quite simple argument, which is never a bitter one, it's just a simple argument, was literally front-page headline news in some New York newspapers. I remember thinking, Lord, what has the world come to? Here we live in the most dangerous moment of history, and they're making headlines out of trivia such as this.
Tempest in a teapot.
Exactly. I think the first little tussle we had was when, on our second week on the air, we hired Elvis Presley, and simply because of that, got a higher rating than Ed. And we had an understanding with Elvis that he would do some more shows for us, but Ed was a very shrewd businessman. He called them up the minute the ratings came in and hired them for several shows at a higher figure. And at the moment, that seemed to be rather like dirty pool, and I think I said so publicly.
Mm-hmm.
So just from such simple material, then the papers took it away and made it the Third World War,
Incidentally, if you join us late, I'm talking to Steve Allen, and he and his lovely wife are appearing nightly at the Sahara Tahoe in Lake Tahoe, and will be there through the 29th. Did I understand, Steve, that you stated the other day once and for all that you are not going into politics?
Yes, I've been stating that now ever since I went into politics. No, to make the story very brief, Jack, last year when Jimmy Roosevelt retired from Congress and was elevated to the United Nations, a number of Democratic Party people in his district, the 26th district down in Los Angeles, came to me and asked me if I would run to replace him. And I'd been receiving suggestions of that sort for 6 or 7 years previously, and it occurred to me that there was only about 8 months of his term left to serve, and that it might be an interesting experiment. So I decided to make the experiment, and after a few weeks of campaigning, it was discovered that I was, on the basis of a little small print at the bottom of one of the phrases in the California Election Code law, ineligible because I was registered as an independent.
Mm-hmm.
And the law says you have to be registered as a member of a party if you're going to be the candidate of that party.
I see.
So it was a little bit ambiguous, apparently, and it required a California Supreme Court ruling. And the ruling adhered to the letter of the law. And so I then had more time to think it over, and I decided I would not run again.
So that's the end of politics for Steve Allen.
Well, that's the end of running for office. I'm still very active as regards particular issues and causes and that sort of thing.
I know that. You were down at the in Delano.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I have a book coming out on that subject in about 4 or 5 weeks. It'll be out now. It's published by Doubleday.
Mm-hmm.
It's called "The Ground Is Our Table." In case some of your listeners don't know about Delano or what I mean by that subject, I'm talking about the problem of farm labor poverty in this country. It's not an easy question to resolve. We'd actually want to keep all of our farmers as prosperous as possible. But just as in the past history of the American labor movement, we could never justify keeping our other manufacturers prosperous if it was at the cost of having workers living in disgraceful, abject poverty.
Mm-hmm.
So the same situation cannot be justified now on our farms.
And the book will be out in 3 weeks, you said?
I don't know the exact date. Sometime, I think, late in September.
On the subject of books, by the way, some years ago, and I don't even know if it's still in print, I read a collection of short stories that you wrote.
Yes.
That were delightful.
Well, thank you.
Just delightful.
Yeah, I wrote a couple of books of short stories. You can probably find some of them now in second-hand stores. I don't think they carry them in the new shops anymore.
Right. One other question. How do you like the nightclub circuit?
Oh, we're just having a marvelous time here. To begin with, it's great fun working with Jane, and she's marvelous in the show. Business is, right now, just capacity. We're, as the old saying goes, packing them in every night. And Sammy Davis is across the street at Harrah's, so the town is really jumping.
Oh, boy.
And we do this on the average once a year. We either play Vegas or here, usually for 4 weeks. And it's great fun. It gives you a kind of creative performing experience that you can't get from pictures or television or the theater.
Mm-hmm. Well, Steve, I'm going to let you run. It was awfully nice of you to take a few minutes.
It's a pleasure to talk to you, Jack.
And how was the motorcycle trip? My last question. You went from Los Angeles to Lake Tahoe on your Honda, right?
Oh, yeah, that was a ball. I just love that. In fact, I'm going to take the motorcycle around Lake Tahoe here the next 2 or 3 days. The scenery up here is so beautiful.
Uh-huh.
I've been hearing a lot of reports that Herb Keane carried an item that I arrived in town with a lot of bugs in my teeth. But,
well, that would make you a happy motorcyclist.
That's right. Big smile all the way. No, that was great fun.
Well, again, Steve, thanks a million.
Thank you, Jack.
And we'll be up to see you soon.
Wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Told you a few minutes ago that we had reached Zinn Arthur in Los Angeles. He's in Los Angeles right now, but you're never sure exactly where he is. He's led a long and very exciting life. Band leader, photographer. Well, we'll talk to him and get some of that firsthand. Hello, Zinn.
Hello, Jack.
We're on the air.
Right.
Zinn, it's been a long time since we had a chance to talk, and I've thought of you often. And when the news of Marilyn Monroe's death hit the newspapers, I thought of you first because it wasn't so very long ago that you were working almost exclusively or exclusively with her. Am I right?
Well, no, I did quite a bit with her. You know, she made 21 films, and I happened to be connected with her on 2 of the 4 hits that she made. And one of them was Some Like It Hot, and the other was Bus Stop.
Only 4 of her 21 films were what you'd call successful?
That's right.
I didn't realize that.
Only 4 were considered box office hits. I mean, 4 made money.
Zinn, when did you first meet her?
Well, I actually met her on Bus Stop when I was working with Joshua Logan. And he's one of the few directors that had no problems at all with her, certainly compared to the recent years when so many directors did have problems.
Well, why do you suppose that was?
Well, I think Marilyn had a rough time with herself more than anyone else. She was a very, she was slightly mixed up only with herself. She was very serious. And she meant no harm to anyone. She was a good gal as far as I'm concerned. And I think that she just couldn't creep out of the shell. That's about what it was.
Well,
the problem stemmed from childhood days, you know, and she couldn't lick it.
Well, Zinn, so many people in the industry seem to have problems with her. In all the work that you did with Marilyn Monroe, did you ever have any problems?
Well, I personally didn't. As a matter of fact, I think I'm one of the few people that had very good luck with Marilyn. When we were making Bus Stop, we were in a location in Phoenix. I think you were there at the time.
That's right, I was.
And all the press, all the major press of the world was there to try to see her. And for 4 days, everyone was sitting around and couldn't get to see her. Well, it so happened at the time she was in partnership with a photographer by the name of Milton Green. And I got together with Milton Green and finally had a good chat, and it broke the ice. And from then on in, Marilyn and I were very good friends. And I was one of the few people allowed to come on and shoot pictures at times when no one else was allowed.
Well, Zim, you photographed some of the most beautiful women in the world. Was Marilyn Monroe the real Marilyn Monroe beneath the makeup and that sort of thing? Was she that beautiful a woman to you?
Well, Jack, to be very frank with you, I did not consider Marilyn Monroe one of the most beautiful girls. I think she was attractive. She had a certain something that was magic, just like Elizabeth Taylor has, or just like Ava Gardner has. Few people have had that little something special, like Jean Harlow at one time, or Greta Garbo, and Marilyn Monroe had that. But I didn't consider her one of the most beautiful. There was something real special about Marilyn that caught everyone, and everyone seemed to like her. But if you saw her close, I'm not talking now on the screen, you would say she was a very attractive girl, but not beautiful.
Well, about her marriages, well, let's see now. When you were working with her,
she was married to Joe DiMaggio.
Uh-huh.
And, her first marriage was only when she was 15 years old.
Yes.
And that was an aircraft worker, and that didn't work out. Well, naturally, at the age of 15, I don't think a girl is ready for marriage. But when she married Joe DiMaggio, it was a surprise that it didn't work out. And Arthur Miller was a short-lived marriage for the simple reason that I don't think that actually should have happened anyway. Arthur Miller was in a different world completely, a much more serious world, a very brilliant writer, and Marilyn would have liked to attain brilliance and intelligence, which she could never have achieved. She couldn't stand up to Arthur Miller, really, as far as intelligence. She was a very nice girl, but she had a lot to learn. She learned by hard knocks, whereas Arthur Miller is a brilliant writer.
Well, Zinn, did you feel, of course there's all sorts of conjecture today about the reason for what happened. Did you feel, I know you're in Hollywood now and probably in close touch with people in the business, was there a feeling that her career was definitely on the way down? Was she through or washed up, particularly with the canceled picture and the pending lawsuit?
Oh, I don't think so at all. I think, as a matter of fact, it was just one of those temporary things that would have given more publicity, and she would have made a comeback probably in 6 months or a year or even 2 years, that someone would have had faith enough, and maybe this had taught her a lesson. She was negotiating with Gene Kelly, I understand, to do some film or something, some project, and I'm sure that some directors would have gone on and done something with her, like Billy Wilder might have done something with her. Someone that can control her would have done something with her. And I don't think it was finished at all. I think all the publicity may have seemed that way, but I'm sure that if you speak to some of your own columnists in your own city, you can speak to Payne Knickerbocker or Paul Spiegel of the Call Bulletin. They have had meetings with her. They know her pretty well in that respect. I think she would have come back big, no more than Elizabeth Taylor is through now. But I will say something. There are 3 stars that have had terrible problems in the past few years. 3 of the biggest stars, and Marilyn was one of them, and Elizabeth Taylor is another one, and Bridget Bardot is another one. I've worked with each one of them and seen some of their problems, and I think I understood them. And I don't know, it doesn't spell anything good for later life for any of them.
Do you think they're an unhappy lot?
Oh, I think they're very unhappy. They just can't be satisfied with anything in life anymore. They've gotten so much out of it that the average person never gets, and they have no privacy. It does something to your life, Jack. It's pretty rough. I pity them more than anything else.
Well, Josh Logan was not anticipating doing anything further with Marilyn, although he did work so well with her.
Well, he didn't have, a man doesn't think of working with a star unless he has a particular property or story. Now, Billy Wilder, I'm sure, would have liked to have used her, possibly for Irma la Douce. Now, I can't tell, but Billy Wilder would use her again, even though he had a lot of trouble with her on Some Like It Hot. Logan was a man who's had trouble probably with other stars, but he was lucky as far as Marilyn was concerned. She had a very close friend by the name of Paula Strasberg.
Yes, of the Strasberg family in New York.
Lee Strasberg's wife,
Mm-hmm.
and Paula has been her coach and been with her most of the time. I'd be very curious to find out the reaction of Paula and Lee right now, because they were very close friends to her. And Paula is an old theater gal, and I think Marilyn wanted to do theater more than anything else, personally.
Well, Lee Strasberg gave a statement to the press yesterday to the effect that Marilyn Monroe, the artist, had never been recognized or accepted or understood by the public, and that we had lost not only a symbol, but more important than that, we had lost a very fine artist, and that was his final remarks pertaining to.
Lee Strasberg knew a side of Marilyn Monroe that I think no one else has known, because she has been working with the actor studio for so many years, and that has been something she loved. You know, anything you do when you love it, you'll do it well, and it'll take the good part of you. Whereas movies, at times she liked, and at times they were just a chore. I think she couldn't take a lot of that discipline. She couldn't take the hours, you know. If they told her to be there at 9, sometimes she showed up at 11, or sometimes she didn't show up. She would get nervous. She would go into the ladies' room and get sick. She would actually get stomach aches.
Well, Zinn, with all the contacts and all the experiences and all the time you spent working with Marilyn Monroe, is there any one thing that sticks in your mind? Anything that you'll possibly always remember about her, perhaps when you forget everything else?
Well, I'll tell you, it's one little story that I remember. I had just come back from Europe, where I had photographed Brigitte Bardot, and I came on the set while she was making Some Like It Hot. And she invited me into the little dressing room. And when we got inside, she knew I had worked with Bardot, and she said, "How does Bardot get away with doing all of those things? She shows so much, and, you know, you can see so much of her. And in Europe, the pictures, they let them expose their bodies quite a bit. Look what Billy Wilder's making me do. He makes me wear these tassels and this and that." And she was very anxious to outdo Bardot. And I'll never forget her reaction to any comments I made about Bardot. And I think she felt that. She wanted to be the symbol that she was. I'm sure of that. She got a certain pleasure out of it. She wanted to be the greatest symbol of sex. And I think she managed to do it.
And in this last movie, the one that all the problems arose on, there were some nude scenes.
Yes, there were. As a matter of fact, I wish I had been there. I'm working on a film right now called The Mad, 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 Mad World, you know, with Stanley Kramer. And all the comics that are on it. And Edie Adams is in that thing, and she does a terrific takeoff on Marilyn. And I wasn't available at the time that they were doing that scene, but I was supposed to come there to cover it. I wish I had done it, but I couldn't break away from a commitment I had. Whenever Marilyn did a big scene, I managed to get on it. When she did the test for Let's Make Love with Eve Montana and all of that, I made it my business to get down there to do it, and I broke all over the world with pictures of her and with Arthur Miller. She was very good copy, you know. She was perfect for copy, and it was proved by the photographers who managed to cover her during this recent thing, and they made a lot of money out of it. And actually, Marilyn had found a way to expose herself. I think we haven't heard the end of the Marilyn Monroe story or what happened in the past 48 hours or since Saturday night at 8 o'clock. For some reason or other, I don't think that she meant to commit suicide.
Well, we shall see.
We shall see.
Zinn, thank you so much.
Don't mention it, Jack.
It was awfully nice talking to you.
Right.
And I'll see you soon.
Right.
Bye-bye.